Pioneers to the history show today. Now, you kind of like be the next wave coming after the mountain man. You know, all the furs were trapped out of the mountains. We've got a lot of mountain men that might like try to guide you across the Rockies, but I guess you have to be careful with those guys. But anyways, it was pretty tough, getting out west. So what was like some of the biggest problems that people encountered?
Well, there was a lot of issues with supplies because we thought our trip, we went on the Oregon Trail and we thought it would only last about 2 months, but it ended up being like 6 months. So we didn't have enough supplies, and like along the way we ended up having to switch some of our roles. Like for instance, I had to drive the cattle and I had to load up the wagon while my husband and sometimes ended up cooking for us, which was not heard of back when we were at home. And then also, one time my son, he was playing in front of the wagon and it ended up running over his leg. And it was clearly broken, but we couldn't do anything because we didn't have any medical supplies with us. So we decided just to wait it out and let it heal on its own before we reached our destination. But unfortunately, his leg got infected and it spread and he ended up dying on the trail. And we had to leave him.
That's sad. That's sad. But there were a lot of like grave markers along the Oregon Trail, weren't there? Like about one on average, one of every mile it seemed like it said a person was buried. So pretty dangerous trip. Okay. All right. Who are you, sir, with your Yukon Jack book here? That's very.
I am Jedediah Fairguard.
And you are a.
Pioneer.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Well, me and my family, my wife, and I had 2 children. Now I have 1. We decided to move westward after I lost my job as a steel mill worker in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We decided it was best to leave and start a new life. Like many families, we left on April 21st, 1831, I believe, yeah. And we traveled by wagon, but many families traveled by foot, by horseback, or even by raft. As we were on our journey, this 2,000-mile journey, we had no supplies, so we had to stop by a couple ports to reload supplies and repair our wagon. So one port was Fort Laramie.
Laramie.
Oh, Laramie.
Use the French pronunciation. It's very good.
And we supplied us, and we had tools to repair our wagon. As a man, I had many duties to do. Like one main duty was to stay up at night and guard the wagon due to many Indian invasions that attacked us. I hunted wild animals for us food, and I just did the hard work.
Yeah, of course, and that's every man says that he does the hard work. But really, I mean, you were in charge of security and you were in charge of guarding the camp. But really, Indians weren't much of a problem, were they?
They were at night.
They were at night. You never knew when they were going to show up, huh?
So we stayed up and guarded our wagon.
But you wouldn't drink or anything while you were doing that. Of course not. Of course not. All right. Now, ladies, I know it's hard for you to speak up, but do you feel that your husband had like the hardest job on the trail?
I would disagree. I think that the duties between the men and the women were shared equally. As a child, I really didn't have much to do. I basically had to stay out of my father's way and help my mother with cooking and washing and things of that nature. But
and you were supposed to watch the younger children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice job with that. Anyway.
But we really, when things became tough on the trail, and as our time grew and it became longer, and we spent more and more time, and we were delayed more, we ended up having to share jobs because it just became so hard for us to have energy to continue going throughout the day, because my father would be driving the wagon and doing all of his jobs, keeping us safe, and we would have to take care of everything else. So it was very difficult.
What about did you know the people that you were on the trail with? Did you know them ahead of time, or? Because you had to spend a lot of time with these people, right?
We knew a few of them. A few of them were our neighbors, and they had the same idea as us to move west, but most of them were just kind of the local communities.
After a while, I mean, I don't know, you ever go on vacation like with another family and after like a couple days they get on your nerves, so you know, you start to go one way or another. But you couldn't, I mean, like the Donner part, it's like, well, I'll eat you. But I don't know what else, like you can't get away from them. You know, I think it would just be like you're stuck with these people and you've got to go thousands and thousands of miles out there and over mountains and through rivers and everything. It must have been incredibly tough.
Well, I mean, and we couldn't go out on our own. It would have been too difficult too, because we're not very knowledgeable around the region, and if we're all in the same, like, if we all have the same issues, it's easier to cope when you have a big group of people that deal with it.
That's good. So it's some sort of a sense of teamwork, everybody working towards a common goal. See, that's the spirit of America. Okay? All right, anything else? Anything else you want to talk about today?
Well, I'd like to talk about some of my jobs, because my husband may think that he had some of the more difficult jobs, but he was too busy sleeping when I was doing all the work. Because I woke up at 4 a.m. every morning, went out, collected buffalo chips that we use for fuel, I hauled water, I kneaded dough, all while the children and my husband were still asleep in the wagon.
But he was staying up all night protecting you from Indians, who really didn't exist. Trying to see how that went.
Also, an important job of my mother was to make sure that my brother and I stayed educated on the trail as we went through. So, on top of all of her other jobs, she had to make sure that we were continuing to learn and grow. So, there was a lot of pressure on her as well as my father.
So some things have never changed then, right? So women still, back then, even today, I think, do women work harder than men? I don't know. If you eat dinner with your family, do an experiment. Watch what your mom does after dinner, and then watch what your dad does. And see, think about how it works. Experiment, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very much. It's been very nice.
Does anybody want apple cider?
Oh, they
If
have
you want it, raise your
cider.
hand.
Is it Castora? Okay.